I'm so glad you're here. Welcome to the Call to Love experience. I am Jasmine Bellamy, founder and spiritual director of Love 101 Ministries. This experience is an invitation, a call to join our spiritual community and engage in this collective contemplative practice. Together, we examine the theology of love and cultivate its practice in our lives. Our focus is transformation, becoming a community of practice. In each episode, we offer practices to help us grow in love together. We discover the practices that help us embody love as a way of life. So make yourself comfortable, light a candle, grab your journal, and open your heart as we listen, engage, and reflect in this communal space. Thank you for being here. I'm really excited about tonight's theme, Evolving in Love, the Enneagram and Transformation. In the words of tonight's guest, who you'll meet in a few minutes, the Enneagram is not simply a tool of self-discovery, but a map of the soul, a sacred companion in our transformation toward love. As we continue to awaken to the truth of who we are invited not just to understand ourselves, but to remember our wholeness. This invitation to love is not new. And when I think about the desert mothers and fathers of the 3rd and 4th centuries who offer deep wisdom on the ego and inner transformation, this is so rich with information for today that allows us to be able to be rooted in silence and self-examination, humility, and divine love. And so now, in our time, the contemplative Enneagram invites us to return to that inner stillness, to allow the spirit to transform us from the inside out. So rooted in 1 Corinthians 13, this conversation will explore how the Enneagram reveals our habitual habits and our ways of seeing the world, and how a contemplative approach can help us evolve beyond egoic patterns to experience love, faith, and hope more fully. Tonight's guest is Reverend Nhien Vuong. She's a JD, an MDiv, an ordained minister, a former attorney, and the founder of Evolving Enneagram. She has also just birthed a new book into the world, The Enneagram of the Soul, a 40-day spiritual companion for the 9 types. And so I am super delighted to be able to welcome her to the Call to Love experience. How are you, Reverend Nhien?
Hello, I'm doing so wonderfully, and just listening to you and being in your presence, it's really quite beautiful. Yeah.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. I'm so glad you're here. This has been a conversation I've wanted to have for such a long time as we endeavor to be a community of practice. This sacred map that you will be sharing with us, your journey with it, your journey with others, I just believe is going to be so helpful for our community as we look to really reimagine wholeness in a world that is often so focused on brokenness. So you are a gift to be here with us. I'm so excited to be able to share your wisdom with our community and, of course, delight in this wonderful book that you have. So thank you for being here.
Thank you so much. It's quite the honor to be here. Yeah.
Thank you. So we're going to start and transition into our communal reading of tonight's centering scripture. And what we'll do, I just want to remind us that, the Call to Love experience is a collective contemplative practice And this week, I actually encountered this beautiful definition of contemplation from one of my teachers, Jim Finley from the Center for Action and Contemplation. And he says, contemplation embodies compassion. The more we transformed in compassion, the more we act with compassion toward others. And as I really sat with that definition of contemplation, and it struck me that there might even be a more expansive word that really represents what we are here to do tonight. And so I restated that quote saying, contemplation embodies love. The more we are transformed in love, the more we act with love toward others. And this is why we practice. And what we believe here is what we practice, we become. So we are going to start. Let's open an opening centering practice. Let us begin by arriving. I'm always sensitive to the fact that we've probably had a busy day, and we're here trying to find a moment of solace and solitude for ourselves and community. And we might still be reeling from the day that's been around us. So I invite you to let go of where you've been and soften into this sacred now. With each inhale, I invite you to receive the breath as a gift. And with each exhale, release what no longer honors your becoming. So notice your body, notice your breath, notice the quiet invitation beneath the noise. It's a beautiful invitation to come home to the truth of who you are, not your roles, not your responsibilities, but the deeper essence beneath it all. The part of you that is whole, the part of you that is love. Let us listen from that place. Let us open to transformation, not by striving, but by surrendering to the soul's wisdom. Here, now, together, we begin. Tonight's centering text is 1 Corinthians 13, verses 8 through 13, and we'll be using the Message translation. We will read it 3 times. During this first reading, notice if there's a word or a phrase, or maybe an image or a feeling that arises for you. Love never dies. Inspired speech will be over someday. Praying in tongues will end. Understanding will reach its limit. We know only a portion of the truth, and what we say about God is always incomplete. But when the complete arrives, our incompletes will be canceled. When I was an infant at my mother's breast, I gurgled and cooed like an infant. When I grew up, I left those infant ways for good. We don't yet see things clearly. We're squinting in a fog, peering through a mist. But it won't be long before the weather clears and the sun shines bright. We'll see it all then. See it all as clearly as God sees us, knowing God directly just as God knows us. But for right now, until that completeness, we have three things to do to lead us toward the consummation. Trust steadily in God, hope unswervingly, love extravagantly. And the best of the three is love. As Rev Nhien reads us and leads us the second reading, and listen more deeply. Notice if you sense a particular resonance or meaning. Rev Nhien?
Love never dies. Inspired speech will be over someday. Praying in tongues will end. Understanding will reach its limit. We know only a portion of the truth, and what we say about God is always incomplete. But when the complete arrives, our incompletes will be canceled. When I was an infant at my mother's breast, I gurgled and cooed like any infant. When I grew up, I left those infant ways for good. Yet we don't yet see things clearly. We're squinting in a fog, peering through a mist. But it won't be long before the weather clears and the sun shines bright. We'll see it all then, see it all as clearly as God sees us, knowing him directly just as he knows us. But for right now, until that completeness, we have three things to do to lead us toward that consummation. Trust steadily in God, hope unswervingly, love extravagantly. And the best of the three is love.
As I lead us in this final reading, simply allow the words to wash over you. Love never dies. Inspired speech will be over someday. Praying tongues will end. Understanding will reach its limit. We know only a portion of the truth, and what we say about God is always incomplete. But when the complete arrives, our incompletes will be canceled. When I was an infant at my mother's breast, I gurgled and cooed like an infant. When I grew up, I left those infant ways for good. We don't yet see things clearly. We're squinting in a fog, peering through a mist. But it won't be long before the weather clears and the sun shines bright. We'll see it all then, see it all as clearly as God sees us, knowing God directly just as God knows us. But for right now, until that completeness, we have three things to do to lead us toward that consummation. Trust steadily in God, hope unswervingly, love extravagantly, and the best of the three is love. I love that scripture. I think everyone, often considers it like the penultimate wedding scripture. But what I love about actually listening to the message translation by Eugene Peterson, it allows us to not get so casual with it and to hear it with new ears in a new heart in the moment. So I'd love to start our conversation just asking, was there a word or a phrase or an image that stood out for you today? And even as you offer that, I want to also encourage our audience to be able to share theirs too. They can put it in the chat. I'd love to hear what word or phrase was standing out for them too. But yes,
Oh,
loving in.
yes. Well, I'd have to say two. The first phrase, "Love never dies,"
Mm,
was just the enduring quality of this thing that can never be lost to me. Like, that sense was so powerful in the reiteration of that in 3 times.
yeah.
So there was that. It was sort of like, "Oh, yeah," and then the rest was just noise. It was like, "Love never dies," and then the rest was just like inspired speech. "Oh, my book. Oh, so what?" Like, I mean, this thing that undergirds it all. That was really powerful. Like, the rest didn't matter in the
Mm,
light of that. Yes.
mm. Yeah, I
Yes.
love that. I
Yes.
love that. I love that. Yeah, it's I love, I happen to, have been well practiced at grief. And so love never dies is like the drumbeat
Mhm.
of my heart and what that looks like to experience it on a day to day, you know. So I love that when you brought that up, that resonated with me. I as I was preparing for our conversation, what I liked about this translation is the fog. The
Mm.
fog, um, the incompleteness of it all, and you may have experienced this too during your seminary life as well, that we can turn things into an academic experience and think we know every answer. And what I love about this, it's like, no, no, it's whatever we think is still incomplete.
Mm.
And so the fog, the incompleteness, the that just kept sitting with me, and
Mm.
it actually just felt so appropriate for this conversation. And I would add to the whole, putting childish things behind, that there feels like this conversation that we are going to have about evolving love, that there's a maturity to that, that
Mm.
there's a decision to grow in love, and so those were the words that were standing out to me as I listened today. But yeah, I always love going to different versions of that text, because we can
Yeah.
rattle it off and and lose some of the beautiful meaning in it.
Yeah, for
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah. I would, when I think about this beautiful book that I have already a ton of highlights in and dog ears, I just want to say,
Wow.
one, congratulations. I'm so excited for you, and super excited for us to receive it, and actually me personally as a student. So I'm really excited about it.
Mm.
Um, but I want to start by asking you about this description of the Enneagram as a map of the soul and a pathway to our wholeness.
Mm.
And you share in the book that you met the Enneagram through your own love of reading, in a moment of personal crisis, which I just that resonated so deeply with me, because it's very similar for me too. So I'm just curious how you, how contemplation through the Enneagram has shaped your understanding of it, and how you've seen it as a sacred tool of transformation.
Mm. Oh, so I'll begin by saying that as you were describing my description of the Enneagram, I was reminded of the notion of fog that you just brought up, right?
Mhm.
And I think that what happened was at this devastating moment in my life where I had at that time left my job and my husband in the same weekend. I was sitting with a bunch of books, one of them an Enneagram book. I think the reality was that like you've alluded to, I thought I was so smart. I thought I knew the things, right? But I couldn't like figure out how to make my life somehow work. Like there was I was a hard worker. I'm like, why can't I make this work? And so this notion that I didn't know I was living in a fog. And reading the Enneagram book, I'm like, there's a lens through which I'm seeing the world that I don't see. I think I see things clearly. That was like the first awakening moment.
Yeah. That's powerful. That's powerful. And I mean, I'd love to hear from that first awakening to this sacred map becoming a part of your journey of contemplation and transformation. And the reason why I asked that question is because I think about, before I studied the Enneagram a couple of years ago, I used to hear people throw out numbers all the time, and, almost like wear it like a badge and I was grateful that I was taught by Ruth Haley Barton, and she takes a contemplative approach as well, a transformational approach as well. And she really emphasized us seeing it as a way of our own inner work and our own understanding ourselves more deeply and a part of our discernment process. And so I think that is such a beautiful way to look at this sacred wisdom. I hadn't not necessarily thought about it as a contemplative practice. And so I'd love to hear what that has been like for you or for the community that you're in as well.
Yes. So one way of looking at the triangle or at the Enneagram is really looking at it symbolically when we talk about it as a map. And if you see it, you see that there's an inner triangle. That for me is a really important symbol. All of these are just like metaphors, right? We're not making an idol of the Enneagram, right? We're using it as metaphor. And so there's an Enneagram. We mostly talk about the Enneagram in terms of the Enneagram of personality. There's an Enneagram of holy ideas. And so the Enneagram of holy ideas says, wow, the circle represents the totality of being, the allness of being, the allness of God, but also our own individual wholeness. Like the circle represents that. But inside there's this triangle business. The top of the triangle on the Enneagram of holy ideas, the top of the triangle actually represents holy love. So we're talking about love. And if you follow the lines of the Enneagram, that top represents holy love. And this notion that in our human experience, we have lost sight of that, lost connection to the truth of that, right? It has become invisible. Though love never dies, we don't always feel it, that experience. Then the Enneagram at 0.6, so that's 0.9 at the top, at 0.6, when you drop down, represents the fear, the existential anxiety in all of us. We're like, oh no, I'm separate. I am not like one with love. And so in that existential like anxiety moment, all of us, if we look at the Enneagram as a map, move to 0.3, which is, so the holy idea of 0.6 was faith. So the loss of faith, the loss of love at top, the loss of faith at 6, and then going to 0.3, there's this loss of hope. And in that, I'll do it myself. I'll develop a persona. So the Enneagram of personality actually represents 9 false selves, 9 personas that we develop as a strategy for coping with our loss of connection to that love. When we know that, then we realize, oh, this thing that I think is even me. So it's not, I mean, it's not just my life I'm foggy to. I'm foggy to like what my true identity is.
Yeah.
That's the beginning of like, oh, this is the false self construct. And when I recognize that it is, I'm willing to die, not necessarily literally, but to who I thought I was.
Yeah.
So the journey of a contemplative approach to the Enneagram, then the reason I even talk about, like this book starts with the Enneagram of personality because it says at point 3, we must get realistic, not do a spiritual bypass and go, what is it I actually really think I am? If you are, and if it's okay to talk about your type, as I've heard you, share, like if you are a 2, if you, it's like there's a particular construct related to the need to be needed. Like that's who I am. Like my identity is linked to being needed. And if that's true, then I might cultivate a lot of dependencies in my life in order to support my egoic structure, rather than being open to receiving, namely receiving love. And then I wonder why I keep giving, and where's the love? But I'm focused outward. So that's where understanding the Enneagram and then applying contemplative practices, and my core practice happens to be centering prayer, which is for me literally ideally twice daily practice of like dying to who I think I am. And so that construct of like first identifying the thing I think I am so that I can be real about it.
Yeah.
Right. And then surrendering that to the divine. In that gesture of self-emptying, that is centering prayer practice, which I know you're deeply familiar with, right?
Yeah. That's so deeply beautiful and rich what you just shared, and it actually goes so beautifully with the opening scripture too. That there's all these things that we think last and matter and all of that, and I have been sitting in this idea of false self systems a lot, and really thinking about what is it to cultivate true self systems. And so what I really love about what you offer and your approach to the Enneagram is that this is, to your point, this is not about I'm going to put some label on me and this is what I'm going to be forever. But it is an ability to get clarity about how we've been operating in the false self system, like what our go-to things are, and what would it be like to surrender and let those things go so that wholeness is available to us. And so for me, even just personally, I have been I will say what the Enneagram helped me do so much. It helped me become more aware of the false self system that was like the story and the narrative that was going on in me. Like there were certain things I didn't necessarily connect the dots. And so the Enneagram for me helped me understand, oh, there's a pride thing that's connected to love. And I was like, oh. not from a bad Jasmine perspective, but to say, oh, I didn't even notice that those two things went together. And now that I'm aware, what does it look like for me to surrender it and to let it go? Or even when it does pop up, I know that is the false self system at work. And so I don't have to, be carried away by it now, like, and I think that's been the thing. It just helps me become more aware of myself. And I love what you said, right? It's the reality of how I have been formed and shaped over time to what does it look like what would I think I would need to do to receive love? And it just becomes habitual. And so to be able to say, oh, no, I'm not going to lean into that anymore. I think it's just a beautiful way. I always talk about the journey of getting to know yourself, right? I think it's Joseph Campbell. I butcher his quote often, but it's like the journey of a lifetime to do that. It's the
Mm,
great privilege of a lifetime. And so to be able to say, oh, that's the tape. I was even thinking about limiting beliefs the other day too.
mm,
I caught myself in something and I was like, what is the limiting belief that is at work right now? But
mm,
again, not in a wag, a finger because I'm bad. It's helping me understand, because love is so core to me, what might be happening here with me. And so it's just helped me, I know, significantly to grow, to heal, to transform, to move into new ways of being that are so liberative and freeing. So I love your approach to the
mm,
Enneagram. I really do. I really
mhm.
do. I really do.
Yeah, I want to say I really appreciate, even though I mentioned the false self system and
Mhm,
I so appreciate it as a construct, I
mhm,
do want to mention
mhm,
that, I believe, and I think this is where we really connect, that
mhm.
our fundamental nature is love.
Yes.
That the nature of existence is love, that
Yeah.
there's all encompassing, everything belongs from Richard
Yeah.
Rohr. And so even in that, I want to say that a lot of times we bring our egoic structure and our old religion, if you will,
Mhm.
to this new path of like contemplative work. And we might say, oh, the false self system, bad. Like we
Mhm.
find out, oh my gosh, as
Mhm.
opposed to there's something about allowing it to
Yeah.
be included, but
Yeah.
not identifying with it. Like it's
Yeah.
not the true identity. It's like the operating system that
Yeah.
we've been operating from, right?
Yes. Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
I love that. I love that. I want to, I had so much fun being able to get my book on release day so I could dig into it and get ready for tonight's
Mhm.
conversation. And I love that you describe it as a little book with big dreams and a companion guide. And what I saw about your structure is that you have 9 principles, 9 practices, and 40 activations. And so I would just love to give you some space to talk about why. Why build a book like that? But I tell you, I love all those little buzzwords about how you describe and form the book. And so I would just love to offer you some space to speak about how you put this beautiful book together.
Thank you. Yes, so, I talk about well, I'm actually people can't tell when I'm on Zoom, but I'm only 5'1" and 3/4. So
Mhm,
little, and I was,
mhm.
been told that I'm little with big dreams, that kind of thing,
Both of us, both of us.
and so the book kind of feels like me, and I just had this image of being a little girl as well, and
Mhm,
in my childhood, when I felt like I was the loneliest person in the world, I actually believe this, and partly
mhm,
because I was so sheltered, not allowed to go out, I
mhm,
couldn't ask anyone if this was true, I didn't have anyone to ask, but
mhm,
I just read books.
mhm,
So
mhm,
books were my friends. Books were
mhm.
the things that told me that there were at least some people in the world who thought like me.
Yeah, yeah,
I wasn't alone.
yeah.
Like, so in that way, books really saved my life. They companioned my
Mhm,
childhood.
mhm,
And so to offer a book that could companion someone who might be maybe even within their own religious organization feel
mhm,
alone in their belief systems, if they're sort of growing at the edge of their systems. I've encountered people where I would bring my unity teachings and they're like, my goodness, I'm so glad we could zoom in here now because where I live there is nothing around me. And
mhm.
so this book in part is designed to befriend you.
Yeah,
Yeah, and then
yeah.
also the notion of friendship as well is one. I think what I've heard from you so far, Jasmine, it, like, feels like this path of humility. It's not a
Mhm,
structure from on high. It's
Mhm.
the friend next to you. It's the
Yeah.
companion. So that's also the spirit of the book.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I
And
love
then,
that.
yeah. And then I'll go into like the structure. So it's 9 principles, 9 practices, and 9 prayers. So
Wow.
yeah, 9 prayers. So in what, like, so there's 3, there's 9, and there's 40.
Mhm.
The 40 activations and the symbolism of 40 for us in the unity tradition and in many other traditions is completion.
Mhm.
Is like it's like long enough. It's sort of like, will you be willing to go through the end? Like,
Yeah.
and 9 also in some traditions represents completion,
Mhm. Yeah.
notably. So the power of number matters to me. That's
Mhm.
one piece of it. But also, the 9 principles were really designed to remind people what the Enneagram was about, and to do it in a pithy but hopefully very depthful way of beginning. Hey, this is an Enneagram book, but remember, you are not your type is the first principle.
Mhm.
Like that, like, don't forget that. Don't start being like, oh, Enneagram, I'm a 3. I'm a 3. Oh,
Mhm.
no, 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 no.
Mhm.
My type structure, my core. So it's designed to be able to like be these short but dense reminders
Mhm.
of these principles by which we can do this contemplative Enneagram work.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so not
Yeah.
your type.
Yeah. Yeah.
Type
Yeah.
is a portal, a path.
Yeah.
And so just really, really holding that. Then the practices, it's the whole idea of like, oh, you could read all the books you want, even the greatest books, and without that spiritual practice, right? It's just a thought, right? A thought you agree with, right? And so there's something about uh, infiltrating, and it was very strategic in that I figured some people who bought the book for the Enneagram would find centering prayer because of the practice. I was like, handed over. She was like, you like the Enneagram? And vice versa. There might be somewhere into spirituality, but they're like, oh, I didn't know the full spectrum of the Enneagram, right? Like, so there's some richness to, again, not doing a spiritual bypass of just going, oh, yes, I'm loving. Well, let's see the ways you're not loving.
Right.
Let's take a good hard look at like what your type does, right?
Right.
So
Right.
so that was part of the structure. And then the prayers, of course,
Mhm.
come from my unity background. And I've used some of them in my retreats. And I heard that, people were printing them out and putting them on the bathroom mirror, just repeating it daily. I've already had a pastor in California say, I've sent your prayers to all my family members now. You know,
Mhm.
these prayers coming from my heart, they go with you as a companion as well. So
Yes.
999. And then the 40 days
Yes.
were were curated pieces. I've written many more activations in that, but the ones I put in there, uh, I felt like in that particular order, I just felt guided to one topic is forgiveness, for instance. So to
Mhm.
describe what these are, it's basically you read, it's almost like a devotional, right? You,
Mhm.
you read a little bit, I write a little bit to explain, and then I offer an invitation for
Mhm.
each of the 9 types uh, that is really about offsetting this habit of type, this compulsion of ego.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So yeah, and then I'll add finally that there are many Enneagram devotionals out there, almost all of which are for one number only, for type ones or for type
Yeah.
two. And this, by having something for all 9 types, I intended 2 things. One is that you start to really see that you're really seeing only through one lens.
Mhm.
The same thing. If you bother to read the other ones, and they're short enough that you hopefully will bother to read the other types, you're
Mhm.
like, oh, that explains why they do that,
Yeah.
right? So there's a deeper, like, broadening of compassion and empathy
Yeah.
through that practice.
Yeah.
And then also having 9 allows you to journey in community with this book.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah. That, I mean, it is just so thoughtfully done.
Mm,
And I do love that, I use this image of opening our aperture,
Mm.
right? To be able to see, to allow more light in. And that's what you offer in us being able to say, there is another way to look at this thing. And it does help us in our relationships with others. So I do love that, to your point, that it's not just an individual pursuit, that this is also about building beautiful and richer community through understanding. And I think it also helps us have more space for grace,
Yes.
because now we've just got some serious insight, and it just helps us see things like from a more 360 way, which I think is really, really, really beautiful.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. And related to that, I found that people who have like read other types descriptions, and then, that person is their husband or daughter and such, they're like, oh, like I don't have to take this so personally too.
Yeah, yeah,
Right?
yeah, yeah,
Yeah, to really
yeah.
understand that there's a default structure that they're responding in this way, whether it's to withdraw from you and run as you're the type that like, moves forward. Like
Right,
it's really
right,
like stop taking
right.
it so personally.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. No, it's lovely. It's lovely. I probably had way more questions than I wanted to ask you than we have time for, but I think the other thing that I wanted to ask you about, I was thinking about the resistance,
Mm,
you know, and it's interesting, as I was kind of settling in and reflecting, I had this theme of resistance. But then I also kind of met it with this idea of return. And I was thinking about a community, a friend of ours who's joined us, Donnie Bryant. He often talks about teshuva, this idea of returning to our original goodness. And so I kept thinking about how, when you have spoken about the resistance we encounter on this path of love, I was also thinking about some of the common ways that we do resist this transformation, and
mm,
how we can gently return, and find ourselves, you know, back to that wholeness. So I'm just curious of if any experiences, I know you've been working in this transformational work for many, many years.
mm.
And I'm just curious of what experience you've had, either seeing people resist, but then even also as they open and can see that wholeness that's available to them. Any personal experiences that you've witnessed or supported people through on the journey?
Mm, mm. So it strikes me that knowing the Enneagram, there are things that I might have previously thought of as disobedience,
Mhm,
rebellion, and resistance to the path
mhm,
that were
mhm,
just through my lens. For
mhm,
instance, type
mhm,
7 is known for its lack of capacity on the average level to just stay, to
mhm,
just
mhm,
stay. And the old me, which I tend to be very law abiding, is like the rules are we all sit down, everybody.
mhm, mhm,
And then I remember there was a 7 in my group when we were still meeting in person who was like floating around the room like most of the meeting. And I realized it was just enough for him to stay in the.
mhm,
So the holding of compassion for the ways that our personality actually acts out actually creates a door for them to stay, for it to start to work. It,
yeah,
yes.
that's awesome.
It's our own trigger, right? So I have to be aware of my type, which I happen to identify as a 3, that it's like, oh, I want it effective and I want it now. Like that's the structure. And over time, I've learned tremendous patience.
Mhm,
And my patience, guess what? Feels more like acceptance to them than my lack of patience. And go, behold, acceptance feels like love, and love
mhm,
heals and transforms. So my
mhm,
presence turn to greater love becomes the presence of allowing personality, allowing false self to run riot even. Sure, I won't go chasing after them if they don't stay in the room. Like at the same time, if they're in the room, it's like that. If they're right before me, and I can look at the ways that through my Enneagram lens and looking at theirs, I'm not giving that grace, if you will.
Yeah. Yeah.
Changes things.
Yeah. I love that.
Yeah.
I love that. We've mentioned it a little bit, but we've not literally explained it. But tell us about the groups that you have that you work with the Enneagram.
Yes. So the primary groups that I have are called contemplative practices and the Enneagram practice and support groups. And I founded this in 2017 in September. And they have been going weekly since then. And we started with 2 groups, and we now have 5 weekly groups. So for 7.5 years now,
Wow.
we've been journeying together, gathering some more people, losing some, some take breaks and vacations and such. But in general, looking at what we at Evolving Enneagram see it as, which is transformation, not as a spot fix, but as a way of life. So that's really the approach. Not everyone again stays, but it's like those who kind of get that, like, oh, they're like, oh, okay. And so over the years, everybody is Enneagram informed in the groups. In fact, now, we put our little Enneagram numbers on our name. And so there's a teaching point regarding that. But every time we meet, we practice 20 minutes of centering prayer. So that is the dying practice. And that's what I tell people. I was like, this is not a therapy group. It is, if anything, a divine therapy group. Allowing for the spirit to move through us. But you can bet that if people feel met sort of in their personhood, that there isn't a division where they're like, oh my gosh, we have to behave now. Like the groups, I make explicit comments about like welcoming all feelings, not leaving parts of you at the door to look all spiritual when you come in. There are places of like where it's raw and it's real, and we surrender into the silence every time. So those are like the primary groups that are the core of Evolving Enneagram. And I know that you'll be, I hope it's okay to share that you'll be participating in one. And yes, so it's really this beautiful journey where we really get to be with each other, irrespective. Oh, I'll add this. It's interspiritual. So, and that's my choice. People can have their own contemplative Enneagram groups that might be all Christian, but mine happen to be interspiritual. And so I get people who are Catholic or Christian, Muslim even, or spiritual but not religious. And I say that because I found that in these groups, people who would probably have never been friends become family. Because we're meeting essence to essence more.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. I'm looking forward to it. I was so delighted. Again, I just feel like it's such an opportunity just to continue to transform and to grow. So I'm looking forward to being able to do that in your community. So thank you. And listen, 7.5 years is a long time. So I also honor you for leading them and your team, for holding space and honor the people who continue to show up and want to be, who want to do that work. To continue to evolve into love. I think it's really beautiful. And just to know a space like that exists, I think is one of the really exciting parts for me. The other thing that I find so fascinating about you, I should say that when I know that the moment I heard you present and you talked about a few themes for me that just, I knew you were my teacher. It was 1, you talked about love. 2, you talked about transformation. And 3, you talked about embodiment as a somatic practitioner. So I would love, as you, connect the dots for us for how we've been having this conversation tonight, but how does your work as a somatic practitioner show up in your work
Mm.
in the Enneagram and transformation, and from a contemplative journey as well.
Well, so I'll start by saying that this is a relatively new piece to my journey, I'd say for the last 2.5 years.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not yet, so it's not in this book, but it could be in the second book.
It'll be in the next one.
It is the work that I do one-on-one with people and at my retreats as well.
Yeah.
But it really, I want to start with sort of almost like the theological framework of like incarnational spirituality, this idea that we're not here just to go back into love, oneness, and like avoid the human condition, but almost like bring the knowing and embodiment of love into our everyday experience, right? It's living love.
Yeah.
And so that at the core is like, oh yes, it's both, and it's the divine and the human.
Yeah.
And so that is core to how I hold what I think is important. And then it's even reflected in the Enneagram circle, where the journey, you start at the circumference when you talk about personality, going to the center, which is spirit. But from the center, we radiate out. And that is our activity in the world, starting from the center that is spirit, and not the center that is ego on the outside, right? So there's that. And so the training does, I mean, it's very involved and has an Enneagram overlay around like sort of likely somatic holdings or constrictions. But from the Enneagram perspective, the idea is that the personality has some idealized aspects. Like for the 3, I'm competent. So what gets shadowed? Laziness and incompetence, right? And when I get shadowed, what happens? Oh, I see it everywhere around me. If I reject it in myself, it's like all these incompetent people. And that used to be my story. It is not anymore, thankfully. When I could look at the moments when I felt lazy or incompetent, didn't do well, and embrace that with love, then like that started to shift the whole world around me. I could authentically hold space for that in community, right? The somatic work does something like extra than even like what it does is it invites us into the energetic space of that. The idea that we hold somatically or in our body, these constrictions, like almost like this is the place I can't go. And so when I work with people, something might come up and I was like, where do you sense that in your body? And so instead of like, let's say a part, like someone's heart might actually be closed. I've had someone who showed up with like literally a wall around his heart. Love doesn't go pounding and breaking the wall. We honor like its importance as part of the system, but we hold space to allow it to belong and hold it consciously. This thing that was unconsciously impacting our lives, constricting our capacity for receiving love, we start to breathe around and hold space for somatically. And then magic happens. It's like you can't even like explain it. It feels like a miracle when you hold the space for this. And then you also breathe into spaces of well-being that already exist in the body, resources. Then you recognize, that I have resource now. The resource meeting the constriction creates a third, an integration that happens. So that's a very short description of like, somatic training that could take a while. But that idea of everything belonging, the idea that like, if something's constricted, if something's fiery, if angry inside of me, we're not going to demonize it. We're not going to reject it. We're going to be with it, allow it, breathe with it. And something then actually changes. It was Carl Jung who said, it's not about imagining figures of light. Enlightenment is not imagining figures of light, but making the darkness conscious.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. Oh, I love that. And, it's interesting. I was also thinking about it too. For me, one of the parts that I also love about the Enneagram is, the integration between heart, head, and gut and body. And so I was even thinking about my own experience where there, years ago for me, my heart was absolutely hardened. Like and then also my body was numb. Like I really couldn't feel anything. I was all up here in my head.
Mm. Mm.
And so even understanding me more clearly through the Enneagram to understand, well, you're actually a hard type, sister. And so what does it look like to start to open up that heart and find your way out of the head a bit and get more integrated into the body? And so it's also helped me get very clear
Mm.
about how life is showing up for me, you know.
Yeah.
But that was, I think, when I realized I was a heart type, but I've always felt very analytical.
Mhm.
I could realize how out of balance
Mm.
I was, and that this
Mm.
this idea of wholeness is the integration of it all.
Mm.
And so, you know, you know, I know you have your favorite practices. One of my favorite practices was yoga from the very beginning. It was meditation and yoga. It
Mm.
evolved from meditation into centering prayer, but it was like I needed to help those other two parts out,
Mm.
um, so that I could also get into this place to get the heart more capacity.
Mm.
So it's, but you know, when I look back, I can see the evolution and the transformation, and so the somatic work is just. I feel like there's probably more time for me to just even continue to go down that path and that journey. So I was so delighted to hear
Oh.
that was your specialty.
Yes, yes. Oh my goodness, for sure. And I'll add that, I mean, you talked about favorite practices. What I love about welcoming prayer as a contemplative practice is that
Mhm.
the first step is drop into the feeling as a sensation in your body.
Yeah.
And there were some people who begin was like, it's almost like I didn't have a body, right? Like, and again, to not make that wrong, but I tend to just believe, oh, we are such amazing. This system is so amazing. It
Yeah.
protects us.
Yeah.
And how scary must it have been to be in your heart is what I thought when you were
Yeah.
sharing that.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah. Yeah.
you
Yeah.
resource yourself,
Yeah.
right? Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, you know, my therapist would ask me things like, where do you feel that in your body? I'm like, I don't feel a thing. Like, so I worked really hard to get to a place to actually feel it. It's been a journey for sure.
Oh,
Um, you know, but as much as I know I could sit here and keep talking for hours, I know I want to honor our time. But you actually kind of led us into our closing in that you
mm,
mentioned welcoming prayer. So to close us tonight, I am going to offer a welcoming prayer. And then
mm,
after that, on the other side, I invite you to just close us out in prayer if you would.
mm.
But this has been so delightful, and I'm so glad our journey is really just beginning. And I just know that there's so much more I'm going to learn and grow with you. So thank you for being here and sharing your wisdom and your so many years of experience with our beloved community that are here today and who will be with us in times to come. So
Mm.
thank you. So I will start this welcoming practice, returning to love. So let us just pause for a moment and take a breath and welcome the truth of this moment. Welcome the joy, the resistance, the clarity, the confusion. Welcome the parts of you that feel open and the parts that are still afraid. Welcome your whole self, your essence and your ego, your longing and your becoming. With every breath, allow love to meet you right where you are. Nothing needs to be fixed. Nothing needs to be forced. Just welcome. Just be. Love is already here. Mm. Rev Nhien, will you close us in prayer?
For sure. So in this moment, we call upon the divine love that never dies, the love that lives within each and every one of us, to help us to each remember that wherever you are, whoever you are, is enough. In this moment, through the eyes of the divine, and in this knowing of enoughness, you open a wellspring of love that overflows, that does not stretch you, but overflows unto the world. And all is enriched by the love that you here now are receiving. And so it is, and so you are. Amen.
Amen. Amen. Oh, thank you, beloved. Thank you so much. This has been such a gift. And until next time, everyone, be well, be loved.